I've spent 17 years working as an occupational therapist and kept having trouble with people discharging from my care and not having the things that they needed. So then we built essentially an algorithm, and then we all got access to AI.
Dr. Brandy Archie
was fed up with watching poor health outcomes. She's now dedicated to equipping occupational therapists with a tech ecosystem to deliver care.
When you use the quiz format of what we started with, you could give up, you could feel like this doesn't apply to me, you could be like, this is too many questions. And when we use the AI, it's significantly better in the fact that like you could just ask it in your own words and then get an answer. AI multiplies our productivity seriously. I can set ChatGPT to working on that for like 10 minutes, if that, and have a whole table that gets me started.
What's a thing you'd love for AI to be able to do or help you with right now that it can't yet?
I'm super interested in what agents can do, in that it actually does a task for me. It feels like a superpower, but also...
All right, everybody, welcome back to the AI for Business Owners podcast. I am, as always, your host, Jeff Torello. Today, my guest is Dr. Brandy Archie. Dr. Brandy, tell us about you and interesting things.
Thanks for having me on. I am actually an occupational therapist by training, and I'm also the founder of Ask Sammy. So we help people age in place or live at home of the disability and make that easier by helping them modify their homes and get the right adaptive equipment and services and resources to do that. So you can go to asksammy.com and ask Sammy. This is why it's named that. Whatever your problem is, like how do I help my mom who has dementia manage her medications even though she lives alone? And you'll get a clinically based answer that has one of the three or maybe all three of those options: some equipment, a resource, or a service to you.
That sounds pretty amazing, obviously, for the audience that would need or want that. You know, I don't know that every 8-year-old's going to do it, but yeah, it seems like it's really, really cool though. What's the data feeding that? What's the back? Like, I don't want to steal it from you. I'm just curious what's feeding it.
Yeah, so it's coming from we trained it, it's based on occupational therapy advice. And so the reason we got to here was because I've spent 17 years working as an occupational therapist inside of the medical model and kept having trouble with like people discharging from my care and not having the things that they needed because they're not covered by insurance. And nobody knows that until you need it. And so I didn't have very good tools to like share that with them. So it was back in the day printing off Amazon so hopefully they can go find it themselves and order it. Then into the local medical supply store, or making like this sheet that says you can get this shower chair from this Walgreens on this corner, not that far from this hospital. Inevitably, all of those were like analog and became obsolete almost as soon as I printed them.
Yeah, absolutely. Right.
I just wanted to make something better. And so that's why we put it together like that. So we just trained it on OT knowledge, stuff that we do every day. It just hadn't been digitized in this way and made accessible.
So it's kind of the inside of your brain put into a system so that people can query it, but also other materials and other things. What's sort of the general thought process around updates? Like, how often are you trying to keep it refreshed, etc.?
Yeah, so the beautiful thing is not just the AI tool kind of gives you a window into all the stuff that's living on our website. And so that's where it learns from. And so if we put up a page for a follow alert button, for example, it automatically now has that knowledge. And when you come later and ask, like, what's a follow alert button that can work for my mom, it's going to pull that information for you. So it's constantly being updated. We're always adding to it.
Yeah, that's kind of neat. My wife was a speech pathologist for 20 years. And spent all of her career hanging out with OT, PT, and speech. So she's got a fondness for occupational therapists and physical therapists. I'm sure you know plenty of speech therapists as well because
we're a happy little triad.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
We are a happy little family.
Yeah. The number of times I've been out to dinner with this poor husband who's like, I don't know why we're here. These guys just they talk all the time together. I go, yeah, I know, it's fine. Whatever. How about you? Do tech? We do tech. All right, let's go. What was the journey looking like from, did you have a tool that wasn't AI to start? Is that where I'm guessing here, I don't actually know the background, but give me some history on what you started with and then it wasn't quite right or it was, whatever. What's that look like?
I feel like it went from analog to digital to AI. So I started by leaving the hospital system and started a private practice. And so everything I just said, we did in person with the person at their house. And then that got challenging to get to everybody in our area that we were getting referrals to, just driving everywhere. It wasn't scalable. So then we built essentially an algorithm that said, if this, then that. And so what you would use is like a quiz on our website. And nobody ever knows what the answers are. That's why it's important to have this as a way to get to it. You just know what the problems are. I'm having trouble getting out of bed, right? And so we narrowed everything down into like 6 problem areas that we felt like covered everything. And then you would just choose and keep going down this tree of this quiz, and then out would pop out some recommendations. And then we all got access to AI. And so we were able to like plug that into Shopify and make it work on our end, so that instead of continuously updating that quiz, which was limited, we now just continue to put information into the website, and then the AI tool learns from that.
The reason I asked that question is because I'm curious about, especially for the audience, but just me personally, right? It's unlikely that people just pop up and have an AI vision like just day one, like boom, I need this. It's usually an outgrowth of, I've been trying to solve this problem in a variety of ways for some amount of time. And you know, everybody's different. And maybe you start doing that in 2023 and people are like, AI is the answer. Cool. But if you've been doing it for 10 years, AI wasn't the answer when you started. And so I'm always interested in what that journey or what that path looks like from the engineer side of my brain. What was a good solution initially? Where did AI make that better, or how did AI make that better? And that's kind of the question I'm trying to get around to asking you, which is, you had that original capability and it worked when you first put that together. It was better than what before you had it. And so it was still useful. But then as you get to the AI solution, it's better, but quantifiably how? Like, and what I'm trying to get you to be able to describe is, why is it better? Why do you like the AI solution better? What is it doing differently? What's it helping your patients or whatever, right? Your clients, et cetera.
When you use the quiz format of what we started with, you're getting a binary or maybe a tertiary choice, right? And you might not feel like what's going on in your life fits into that box, but I need you to keep clicking to get to the end, right? And so you could give up. You could feel like this doesn't apply to me. You could be like, this is too many questions. You know, there's lots of ways to fall out of that. And when we use the AI, it's significantly better in the fact that, like, just use your own language. I don't have to worry about, like, what does my potential patient call this thing? Let me make sure I put it like that in the quiz, even though I know the real name is X, right? I don't have to worry about none of that. You could just ask it in your own words and then get an answer.
Yeah, okay, that's a really useful point. I think we want to stress that one just to make it clear, right? Prior to AI, if you're writing an application or an interface, you have to presume and assume how the user is going to interact and the choices they're going to make, or you have to rigidly restrict the choices they can make to your little drop down or your checks. Like they can't freeform anything. They have to find. And what I think most people would relate to is, as you've used applications for the last 15 or 20 years on a website for an insurance company, doesn't matter, it's been very restricted and restrained because you can only do the things they've programmed for. But what the AI allows you to do is take freeform input from the user and interpret it and infer what they meant, or semantically what you were looking for out of what they typed. And you can always prompt them again and say, well, we didn't quite get the right answer. Fine. But that go back is pretty rare because the large language model can process what they type pretty efficiently. And so less effort on the consumer of the product, the user, and the developer writes a reusable thing that can continue to interact with the user and get more data and get more information. I almost think that the AI solution, once written, is probably easier to maintain from your point of view or from your team's point of view, because there's a lot less rigidity to have to enforce. Is that true?
That's 100% true. So, like, almost as soon as we had the quiz version ready, we started to see the flaws in it. You know, as we test it and use it with more people, then you see, like, oh, you think this means this, and I think it means this. And so you didn't end up at the solution you wanted, right? Or the solutions that we actually do have, but it was down a different pathway. And then just the process of adding in products and services and tagging them appropriately so they showed up at the end of the quiz in the right spot was very manual and required a lot of, like, trying not to think like a person who's been doing this for 20 years, but think like a person who doesn't know anything and use their words, which is really hard to do because I've been doing this for so long. So it's a lot less maintenance.
I inferred a few of that, but it's good to see that confirmation. And it's good to know that not just my inference, but your experience in the real world is kind of what I was presuming there. In this scenario, is there any piece from an AI perspective that like you're struggling with, or that won't, like you can't get to do what you want, or has been difficult? Is there, like, there's obviously some pieces that AI has helped you and you're happy with it. Great. Are there pieces where you're like, man, I wish it could do X, or I wish we could find a way to do Y?
We found ways to make it work well for us. Let's start there. So overall, I think it's great. But when it comes to like the actual development of it, for example, on our website, we're using a plugin. So another app that somebody built on Shopify,
Okay.
and it has its own level of limitations. And
Sure.
while we train it and it does a pretty good job, there are a few things that would be better, because I know AI could do it, but this application doesn't. Right. And so I could go through the effort of like building from scratch, but that takes time and money to
And
do.
money. Yeah, absolutely.
When I have a tool that works pretty well, and then on the flip side, we also have a like a provider side to this. There's like a patient facing side and there's a provider side. And we have a bunch of other occupational therapists who use the provider side. We did build natively there with our AI tool. But then that also means that we got to continue to update it. The application developers on the client facing side, they're working on it all the time. That's what they do. So we've got to do the same thing at our end, and that takes time and effort too. So it's just a matter of like, not that we don't have the capability to do it. It's about the implementation and making sure that we have the resources to do it.
Since you actually happen to have the amazing use case of one commercial thing you purchased, the plugin for Shopify, and one custom that you paid for, I don't need to ask you the money part, but which one ends up delivering more value to you? The one that you paid for, that you customize, that does exactly what you want, or the one that's off the shelf is an 80-20 solution? It isn't perfect, but it gets you really close and you didn't have to build it. Where are you riding that line of, I really want another custom one, or I want another commercial one, right?
I think uniquely coming from me as a non-tech founder, I appreciate the one that was out of the box, because I can edit it very easily. It has a user-friendly interface. It doesn't require code. And so I can move faster there. Whereas my custom one, as we grow and iterate and change, I then have to get my team to make those changes. So I don't get to do it directly. And that also might not be the top priority of things that we need to develop. Does that make sense?
I understand. And is there a preference?
So it's just a give and take,
Oh, of course. Yeah, there's always pros and cons. Maybe I'll ask you this way, right? Gut check. If I specifically said to you, you either have to buy one or you have to build one, you only get one, which way would you have gone, knowing what you know right this moment?
I think I would probably invest in the building of one. I hate to choose, but I think I would invest in the building of one, because then my options are not limited.
Because you get what you specifically need for your use case and requirements when you build it. But you also know immediately, because you've done it, that the minute you release it, it needs work.
Yes.
And it's just the way it is, right? The other side of that equation, just so we're clear, and we're not trying to bash custom software. Commercial software immediately needs work as soon as it's released too. That's why there's always updates and versions and patches and whatever. Like, it's just the nature of software. The other part of this equation, I've spent 30 years doing software development, so I have a little bit of commentary, but the other part of this equation is the hardest part of software development is requirements derivation, because understanding what you need to build is the part that takes the longest and is the part most often rife with error. Because as a software developer, if you give me a list of I need this, and I can see the individual requirements or features, I can build that. And, barring bugs, it's not difficult to build what you want. The problem is, the minute you get what you want, you realize you were wrong. The minute you get it, you go, oh, I didn't, until this was in front of me, I didn't realize I need that, not this. Or I need that too. It doesn't make this powerful unless I have that. And I know from the look on your face that you've probably already experienced that, right?
This is like the beauty and the benefit of having a CTO as a co-founder, because then we spend a a lot longer time than I thought we ever would need to, but now I understand it in the development phase of like the sketching it out and be like him ask me all the questions, so that he'd get to the root of like, what am I actually asking for? And that I also understand what he's building so that we can make sure that not just that they align, but that the words I'm using, he's understanding, and the stuff he's building, is translating, right? Because this is like a translation thing that's happening.
A couple things I'll throw at you that I think might be helpful for your work process. The first one is there's another way to approach this sort of a project. Not like you technically have to change anything, but the way to approach this is it's not a solution that you deliver with a period, with a point in time. It's a solution that you just are continually working on. And so your whole approach and mentality is, I don't need to know everything up front because I know I'm not going to know everything up front. I'm going to deliver this tranche of information, this data, this feature set, whatever you want to call it. And then users are going to use it. We're going to get feedback and we're going to change it. And I'm going to then look at, okay, I want this. And I'm never thinking about this as one, done, and used. I'm thinking about it as this continuous spectrum of constantly revising, knowing that I'll learn more every time I change it. And then I'll be like, no, I could do better here. And that's just one mentality shift. There's really no other change there because that's what you're doing anyway. Even if you don't want to do it, it's the only way you can do custom software like that. You can get away sometimes with a very small point solution, like solve problem X, no other thing, we're done, ship it, use it, never touch it. But not often, right? The other thing that I'll say to you, are you familiar with the concept of vibe coding?
Yes, I'm familiar with the vibe coding.
Well, the reason I was bringing it up, and I'll just explain to the audience for 5 seconds, and then we'll talk a little bit more about it. But basically, you can use an AI tools, something like Claude Code or even Claude Desktop to an extent, or Cursor as a tool called Cursor.ai, and others, Windsurf, etc. You can prompt, like you're talking to an AI, to a tool that writes software. And you don't have to be a developer, and you don't have to know anything about code. I bring it up because you might be able to take advantage of that when you're interacting with your CTO. If you wanted to prompt your way into a UI element or make it look like this and just show a visual rather than a description, if that A looks interesting to you, and it may not, that's okay, it doesn't have to. But if it looked interesting to you, and your CTO might be like, oh, yeah, I got it. Potentially. That doesn't mean that that's the case, but I'm offering as a potential suggestion for you.
It's actually been a way that we've used to have us keep moving quickly as a small team. So if I can vibe code a solution, and we can use it for a while and then get some feedback on it, then makes the thing that we actually build and integrate into our system be better upfront, and his understanding of what we need be easier, and then we can build it like nicely and cleanly and make sure it works with all the rest of our tech stack.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. I'm trying to offer that up as a suggestion more often when I can, especially to product teams or development teams. The biggest advantage I see to vibe coding today is less for the developer and more for the non-technical or non-developers who are, always part of a software team. That you can't do CTO only. There's got to always be a visionary, a person with whatever. There's always yin and yang, right? If that person has some tooling to be able to let them display their thoughts, which sounds weird, but that's what vibe coding can do. Picture's worth 1,000 words. Showing a dev, I want it to look like this. Even if you don't even give them the code, you show them the screen and never share the code, because the vibe coding thing doesn't have to be used. It's super powerful. Obviously, you've experienced that as well. Do you use AI, aside from the tooling that you've built personally, or for the business, I should say, to do other things, to do, productivity kind of tasks? And if you do, what sort of things do you find it's useful for?
Okay, yes and yes. Personally, for sure. And my kids love it too, because they ask lots of questions and we get to get better answers than what might be in my brain. So we use Gemini for that on my phone. Professionally, I use AI a ton. So I started with ChatGPT and it works for me, so I keep using it, right? And I'm not saying it's the only place I could be it, but it knows me now. So I spend a lot of time talking to different audiences about the same thing that we're doing in our business, whether that is applying for grants or making new marketing information, writing emails, like mass marketing emails to our listserv, or to thinking through how I might talk to an investor about what we're doing in a way that connects with what their investment thesis is. All of those are still based on the fundamental knowledge of what our business does, but it's like rewording it into language that works for each of those people. And so I have projects for each of those areas and use them very heavily so that I don't have to obsess over the words that I use. And then it also makes it a lot easier to do the research behind what I do need to know in order to speak to those audiences.
Do you have any sort of corporate like policies, like all the folks need to use AI? Like, I'm just curious where you are in the spectrum of, people use AI if they want to, or we require everybody to use AI.
We're a small team, so it doesn't require a mandate, but the way we've landed on it is like, let me make sure you have access to these tools. Let me say, hey, can you do this task? And you might find it easier to do it with ChatGPT. And then once they got started using it, everybody's using it because we have a lot of work to do and not a lot of hands. So AI multiplies our productivity seriously.
There's a phrase from the military that's been used. I've spent some time at defense contractors, and it's called a force multiplier is the phrase, and it's used as a definition for a lot of things, right? A bazooka could be a force multiplier, or a rocket, or whatever. Even a vehicle is a force multiplier if it gets you there faster, that kind of thing. But from my point of view, I think AI is a force multiplier from a productivity perspective. When used correctly, when appropriately used as the assistant that it can be and those sorts of things, you can consider it a force multiplier. In some cases, that means somebody can do more than they would do on their own. In some cases, you can do more with less people. There's a bunch of different scenarios in there. I find it interesting that some of the use cases that I see, like Microsoft pitching, is the AI can help you, Copilot can help you respond to an email. And I kind of often wonder, is that really where I need assistance? I find some of the use cases a little bit of a stretch for me. Maybe like weeding through a bunch of spam to find real emails, potentially, but I think most email clients can filter pretty successfully at this point. I find some of the use cases a little low quality. That's what I'm trying to get at. And so I'm just curious if you've got one or two high quality use cases that you would maybe share with the audience that are your personal, hey, I really like these kind of thing.
I think one of the key ones, especially at the stage that we are at, is in fundraising. And so you need to spend time reaching out to a lot of different people who have a lot of different motivations and a lot of ways they think about what you're doing. And you might apply to all of them, but you need to know how to connect. What's the connection point? So deep research mode really makes it easy for me to say, like, here are my qualifications. I'm looking for VCs that are in health tech or whatever my qualifications are. And I need to know what their website is, who I might be connected to. Have they invested recently? Do we have any recent, like all of those are like knowable and doable by me, but that takes hours of work. Whereas I can set ChatGPT to working on that for like 10 minutes, if that, and have a whole table that gets me started.
Let me follow that up. So, okay, deep research mode, you fire off a query, it goes off and, it says thinking. I don't think thinking's the correct response of what it's doing technically, but whatever. Well, let's keep the fallacy going. It comes back and it gives you an answer. What do you then, how do you, I'm trying to ask this particular question. If you got that answer from a random website, you would equate it with some level of value. If you got it from Wikipedia, you might change the level of value internally, for, do I trust this or do I think it's relevant? When ChatGPT gives you a deep research response, are you questioning it and like scrubbing it and looking at it with a sort of an eye for where it might have gotten something wrong, or you just kind of, it's good? What's your view there?
Okay, I think it significantly depends on what the output is I'm looking for. So if I'm writing something that has data and is citing some source, I'm checking every single source to make sure it actually exists and it said this thing. If it's like the investor situation I said, I'm always making sure that it gives me a coordinated set output. So like I set all those prompts, but also what I usually end up saying is, how should I talk to this person about what Ask Sammy does? And if it gives me something that makes sense, then I know it understood and it's right. And if it gives me something that I'm like, that's a little off the edge, I might click and dig in more deeply.
If you go to ChatGPT or your favorite AI, it doesn't matter, and you prompt it and say, tell me a story about, and make something up, it will tell you that story. And we've done that sometimes, especially with children or others, where we want to demonstrate what can an AI do. And it's not regurgitating a story it found somewhere. It's inventing from scratch, right? What makes everybody think when you say, tell me your sources, that it doesn't also invent the sources sometimes? Well, I mean, it doesn't. So here's the problem. And I try to get this across, and it's sometimes complicated, right? You and I infer the phrase, show me your source, to be a thing of give me the truth. But the AI just sees words. You prompted it. You could have said, tell me a story about flamingos, and it would have made up a story about flamingos. Instead, you said, give me some sources. So it made up some sources because it's doing what it's trained to do, which is generate responses. And it always wants to give you a yes. It never wants to tell you no if it can help it, right? They're always biased towards trying to give you a response. So when you ask for sources, sometimes you're going to get good source material. And sometimes, as a lot of attorneys and others have tried to find out the hard way, you're going to get complete nonsense made up by the engine.
I think this is why the tools that you choose matter. So I talked about I use ChatGPT the most. That's because I spend a lot of time just writing, whatever it is, applying, reaching out, whatever. And I'm okay with it not making stuff up, but like, that's not true, but taking the data I've given it, the sources I've given it, and then expounding on that. And I'm reading it and then saying, yes, I agree with this, or I'm going to edit this and send. When I need something that's like completely accurate at all times, and I don't want you pulling in any other information, I like to use Notebook LM, where then I can drop in a bunch of research papers or my legal documents and say, like, what should I understand about this? And then it's citing it, and I click on it, and then I can go see in the document where this is at and help me better understand it so that I don't have to fight through the legalese as much. Then I know that I'm getting accuracy because it's taking me directly there, and it's also not pulling in anything. It's not making up a story. It's not going to make up a story.
I can relate specific instances, and they're recent, so they're not old and bad models or whatever. Instances where I've asked for, give me this sort of, not exactly a full deep research question, but more of a light research question, and include some source material so I can go look at further information. And 2 of the 3 source material links were relevant and valid. And the third one went to, I don't know what that URL was, but it was not remotely the same topic. And I thought, you didn't get a single word of your response from this URL. You just threw a third one in there because somewhere in your system you saw sources should be 3 and not 2 or whatever. I don't really know exactly what happened, but I think it's relevant for folks to grasp that just because you ask for sources doesn't mean it's actually telling you the truth all the time. So check the work always.
Always. And sometimes the sources look correct. Like I'll look at the link for the source and I'm like, oh, it came from this website. This is the title of the article. And it seems, I'm like, oh, I probably got it. Click. Completely different.
You always got to check it if you care about the relevance and sort of factuality underneath, right? If you're asking for creativity and you don't, necessarily care, fine. And you could, as an example, you could say, like if you're a student, you could say, show me an MLA style, I don't remember if MLA does citations or bibliography, whatever. You know what I'm trying to say. And it'll give you an example.
I know what you're saying.
And it'll be nonsense. And it's the same question as show me your sources. It's still just, it doesn't mean what it used to mean, at least for us. So then the next question that's not answerable, but a thought question for everybody is, well, what other things do you ask the LLM and it doesn't interpret the way you interpret as a human, and it just randomly makes stuff up? It's a thing for folks to be thinking about because of the way these work. They're powerful and they do really cool things, and I'm a fan. But at the same time, it's sort of a trust but verify kind of approach. All right. I've been enjoying our conversation. I want to ask you two things. The first one is, what's a surprising use or sort of result from AI that you've personally received and thought, wow, that was unexpected. I didn't think it would do that, or I didn't think I'd get there.
I had an example of when I was using an AI coach as a way to journal, for lack of a better word, kind of just get my thoughts out. And I can clearly see as a human being that I'm looking at my phone and I'm seeing a chat, and this is by audio, so I'm talking to it. It's responding back to me. And I am smart enough to know that like it's just re-saying to me what I said to it, just in different words. But that process was still super useful for me to process my own thoughts. And I still came away from that conversation with more clarity, even though it didn't necessarily teach me anything new. And I felt myself engaged in the conversation, even though I knew I wasn't talking to a person. And it was still beneficial. So that was one of the ways that I was like surprised. And I think it was useful and helpful for my use case, but I can also see how it would be really troublesome and problematic for the wrong person, or in more vulnerable situations where you're talking more about yourself and personal life and love and emotions. I'm talking about business use case and like problem solving through something. And so it could be super powerful in a good way and a bad way.
Yeah, comment on that is, there's a lot of positive and negative commentary about people using the LLM as a therapist. To the point that you just made, there's value in standing in front of a mirror and talking to yourself. It may not seem logical to everybody, but there's value in getting those thoughts out and just seeing yourself talking and thinking through as you're saying. Like, there's value in that. Just hands down, it's proven. I don't think anyone would debate it. So, same comment. There's value in talking with an LLM about a thing that's bothering you or struggling with, to get your thoughts out. And the LLM, generally right now, they're trained to try and respond positively, those sorts of things. That's one little narrow positive use case that, great. But when you replace a psychologist with ChatGPT, it can lead to problems. And there's a decent amount of research about how this is easy for people to talk to because the robot doesn't judge you and it's not another human being, even though the idea of a psychologist or a psychiatrist is that it's a disinterested third party. Well, that's probably only true the first time, right? Then the second time you talk to the same person, they're no longer a disinterested third party, and you know them, you've built some rapport. It doesn't even matter if it's please sit down, thanks, here's the bill. There's some amount of, human interaction there. And the more you do it, I've had my same psychotherapist for 8 years. Okay, they're not a disinterested third party. They know more about you than just about anybody, right? And for some folks that are very vulnerable or shy or anxious, or a lot of ways to describe that, talking to an inanimate robot is easier. But boy, there are some problems that just should not be left to the current state of an AI.
Yeah, because they're very sycophantic, right? And so if you're not able to parse that out, and you just keep going maybe down a spiral. Like sometimes that's good if you need to build your confidence for a big speech or something, and it's like constantly reinforcing what you're doing. But it's horrible if it's constantly reinforcing the other direction.
If you happen to be stuck on a bad train of thought, a friend, a relative, someone else might be able to redirect you just by saying, what? Like, why is that the conclusion you're jumping to? There's a bunch of, I'm
or even
simplifying.
Your facial.
Yeah, no, agreed. And we're simplifying because neither one of us are psychotherapists. But the point is, the LLM is not. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, the LLM is explicitly trained to try and keep you engaged and try and be positive with you. But sometimes that means it'll agree with you when it shouldn't, when the feedback should be no. The second question I wanted to ask, because that was a great one, thanks for that, is what's a thing you'd love for AI to be able to do or help you with right now that it can't yet?
I think we're very close, and the ability to do it might already exist, and I haven't explored it yet. But I'm super interested in what agents can do, in that it actually does a task for me. However, I worry about the spending of money, and we just talked about how it can be inaccurate, and so I've been slightly worried about stepping my toe into that. And so even like we use Notion as our primary way of like that's our knowledge base for everything in our business. And Notion just came out with agents. So anything I can do in Notion, an agent theoretically can do. But also there's a lot of information in there. And how do I put barriers around it so it doesn't do things that I wouldn't want it to do? And it feels like a superpower, but also like could get out of control easily. And so that's like kept me from having it help me be more productive in life, like booking flights or ordering groceries or, any other kinds of tasks that I do on a computer that it technically could execute. But how do I make sure it executes it the way I would do it and with my boundaries?
That's a fantastic question. It's a good one for us to close our overall conversation on. There's a significant amount of concern around privacy and security related to AI. And in fact, as you move forward in the agentic era, which we're all going to get to because it is super powerful, the agents are less useful to you if they don't have access to private information, access to memories. And, as an example, use your booking agent. You want your booking agent to remember that you only like window seats. You don't want to answer every single time. You despise having to pick the seat, right? So these are the things that the agent should automate out of you, the minutia that you don't want to be bothered with. And then booking flights for yourself, you always want a window seat, but when you travel with your husband, making it up, I'm making it up, obviously, you don't want a window seat, you want a middle seat because you do something different or you both want aisles, whatever, it doesn't matter, right? So I want you to have memory, but I don't want you to have memory this time, right? And is that built into the system? Right now it's not, it needs to be, those sorts of things. Those are all get solved. I'll say this though. I would encourage you to play with the agents. And if you need to, play with the agents in a new notebook where you just put in some information, because I want you to experience what the agentic capability can be. So to find a way to do it safely, I will say, from a lot of my own experimentation and playing around and building things for customers, agentic AI will absolutely change most of the naysayers over to, oh shit, because it is amazing. They have to be done correctly. They have to be set up the right way. But when you couple an intelligent agent, what are known as MCP servers or MCP tools, so Model Context Protocol is what MCP stands for. And just real quick, an LLM is really good at processing and producing language. That's why its middle name is language. Okay, great. If I have a tool, and a tool in this case is just computer code that performs a function, just think of it that way. That's what we call a tool for an MCP server. I can write a description of that tool. Here's what I do. Here's what I need input. Here's what I return output. Now the LLM can read those instructions and now have a capability. Think of Neo in the Matrix movies from a long time ago, where you can just upload new information into the brain and poof, it's there. Well, that's what happens when an LLM with agentic capability encounters an MCP server that it wants to use. It can read instructions for how to do it and what it should give it and what it should receive. And it can then say to you, I can plan the trip and I can give you map turn-by-turn directions. Like I can do all these things, but the agent can't do all that. The agent has access to Google Maps tool and a flight tool and all these different things. And this is where things start to become powerful because it's a simple example. If I have the right set of tools, I can make an agentic prompt that says, find the closest Starbucks, this location, and show me pictures of the inside of that store. So that without moving and without making 4 Google searches on my own, if I want turn-by-turn directions and a link for the closest whatever it was I asked for, and I can see inside and be like, is that a store I want to even go to? Is like, I don't know anything about where I am. I'm traveling. I don't know the area. Do I want to be in this neighborhood? Is it, I don't know. Maybe pictures of the store and pictures of outside the store will tell me, oh, this is a cool place, or Ooh, that looks run down. I'll find a different one. Okay, fine. You can't easily do that without first searching Google Maps, figuring it out, then like searching Google Images and hoping it's the same store and all that stuff. Whereas the agent just uses the right tools and does it in one fell swoop. Okay. Where this becomes powerful is when you're able to chain the agents together and move content from A to B to C. So instead of just trying to write this very convoluted prompt, you just ask for what you want and the system figures out, I can use this tool to do this, I can use that tool to do that, and I can get to the answer over here. And that's why I want to encourage you to play with it, because I can't tell you how it'll be valuable to you. But once you start messing around, you'll be like, whoa, wait, can it do this? If it can do this, this becomes, and then you're looking at automating a lot of workflow and tools that you currently do manually. And that's where the productivity is going to come from, is being able to automate things that you currently have to do by hand and just turn them into a command. What I see down the road here is knowledge workers harnessing multiple agents as that's the way they do work. An old school boss from the 80s who had 3 secretaries and a steno pool and these sorts of things, right? And they would fire off requests and stuff, and 4 or 5 people would do work, and then a report would be created. Well, get all of that out, right? Or think of Harry Potter and the whole idea of just automating. And now you just ask the AI and it agentically fires off requests, tools do work, things come back, coalesce, and a report exists. And it was like a deep research request. It might have taken 5 minutes, but boom, magic. It's right there.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to being able to play with it and like setting aside some time, come up with ways that I feel comfortable using it, and it's also going to create some level of better productivity in life or work.
The way I would leave this conversation for you is please go play with Agentic, because I think you'll find a lot of uses for stuff that you may not know you can do yet. It'd be really cool. That was a great conversation. That was fun.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here, and thanks for giving me some interesting things to talk about and cool questions and stuff. It was great. I will say goodbye and wish you excellent luck on your AI journey.
Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.
You too.